Today is Monday, March 30, 2026. And if you're listening to this right now, a digital clock has basically just hit zero.
Yeah, we're right at the deadline.
Exactly. You are sitting at the exact deadline of this just completely unprecedented ultimatum. There's this highly organized, notorious hacking syndicate known as the Chronus team, or sometimes the Chronus Mafia.
Right.
And they've set today, March 30th, as the day they pull the pin on a catastrophic data dump targeting basically the highest levels of the Argentine government.
That's exactly where we find ourselves today. I mean, we're looking at a live, actively unfolding crisis.
It's terrifying, honestly.
It is. And, our stack of sources for this deep dive is, well, it's completely different from the typical post-mortem reports we usually analyze. We aren't looking at stuff from 6 months ago.
Right. This is all happening right now.
Exactly. We are looking at intercepted live audio transcripts from X Spaces, another platform formerly known as Twitter Spaces. Plus, we have live digital forensic intelligence reports, threat intelligence flashes, screenshots of these highly public threats, and the actual personal intercepted communications of key figures operating right now in the cyber underground.
It's just entirely surreal to me. I mean, we're watching state-level cyber warfare play out live on an app that, most people just use to argue about sports or follow pop culture.
Yeah, it's definitely a massive shift in how this works.
And at the absolute center of this digital hurricane, literally mediating between this highly aggressive hacker syndicate and the massive government institutions they are attacking, is one incredibly unique individual, a man named Alberto Daniel Hill.
Yeah, Alberto's position in this whole ecosystem is it's something we really need to unpack today. His journey is profound.
It really is.
Because he went from being a wrongfully imprisoned cybersecurity expert to becoming essentially the most trusted, neutral confidant of global hacking cartels.
Which makes no sense on the surface.
Right. But it's this remarkable chronicle of personal and ethical overcoming. And, his involvement highlights what threat intelligence analysts actually call a bifurcated threat. We really have to analyze two entirely different battlefields simultaneously here.
Okay, wait, let's break down that concept before we go any further. A bifurcated threat. What does that actually look like for the listener who is just, trying to visualize this attack?
So it basically means we cannot just look at the code.
Okay.
On one side, yes, obviously you have the technical layer, you've got the servers, the breached firewalls, the high-level data exfiltration. That's the silent, mathematical theft of millions of records.
That's traditional hacker stuff.
Exactly. But on the other side, running completely in parallel, you have psychological operations, PSYOPs.
Wow, okay.
You have the human elements and the sociological dynamics of this decentralized digital swarm. And they are operating in plain sight on social media using performative aggression to basically amplify the damage of the technical hack.
So you're saying the noise itself is just as weaponized as the actual code?
Precisely. If we only analyze the data stolen from Argentina, we completely miss the actual weapon, which is the psychological friction applied to the population and the government.
Well, let's actually look at the sheer scale of the data they're weaponizing, because the March 30th ultimatum is just staggering.
It's massive.
Yeah, because the Chronus team didn't just quietly steal data and run away. They posted a public letter. They published this highly specific, frankly terrifying menu of what they successfully extracted from Argentina. And they're promising this mega leak from numerous vital institutions.
And the targets listed in their public release, they represent the foundational pillars of the state.
Right.
We're talking about IOMA, which is the social works program of Buenos Aires. That alone means over 2 million highly sensitive citizen records.
2 million?
Yeah. And then you have the Ministry of Security of Salta. That's another 2 million plus records. OSEP Mendoza, over 1 million records.
And it scales up even higher than that, right to the very top of the judicial and executive branches. Looking at the sources, they hit the Supreme Court of Justice over 40,000 records. And the Cabinet of Ministers, they got 140 gigabytes of internal data.
Which is astronomical.
Right. When you think about what 140 gigabytes of plain text and internal communications from a national cabinet actually looks like, it is an ocean of state secrets.
Unimaginable amounts of data, yeah.
They also hit the Ministry of Health for another 1 million records. And perhaps most chillingly, they extracted 45,000 highly classified records from the central bank.
Yeah, that central bank data is particularly critical.
Why is that the worst one?
Because this isn't just retail banking information. This
Yeah.
isn't just, checking account balances. This is macroeconomic data, currency reserves, state financial strategies.
Oh, wow.
Exposing that level of internal planning can directly impact international markets and currency stability. It's state-level sabotage.
And instead of hiding this, Cronus has been actively escalating the threat publicly. We have these intercepted posts from hackers operating under the names L0stex and Adrex.
Yeah, the leaders of the group.
And they've literally been treating this data breach like a concert countdown. They're on X tweeting things like 3 days left and watch out on the 30th. Haha.
The arrogance is incredible.
It is. They even went as far as defacing the official government website of the Ciudad de Catamarca. They just slapped this massive hacked by Cronus banner right on the front page as like their opening warning shot.
Which, forces us to ask a really fundamental question about modern cybercriminal psychology.
Right, because here is where I really have to push back on the traditional logic of a crime. If you are a massive criminal syndicate and you have successfully bypassed the firewalls of a national central bank and a Supreme Court, why on earth are you broadcasting a save-the-date flyer on a public social media platform?
Seems counterintuitive.
Extremely. In the real world, if I rob a bank vault, I don't go stand in the town square with a megaphone announcing what I stole and exactly when I plan to release it. Doesn't that just invite international law enforcement to pinpoint your location and knock down your door?
In the old days of cybercrime, yes, absolutely. But you're applying a traditional stealth-based heist model to a completely new paradigm.
Okay, so what's the new paradigm?
If we connect this to the broader picture of Latin American or LATAM threat intelligence, the strategy has purposefully shifted from stealth to spectacle.
But why the shift? How does creating a spectacle actually benefit them?
Well, first off, Argentina is a high-priority target right now just due to systemic infrastructure vulnerabilities. But there's also a deep sociological legacy here.
What kind of legacy?
Previous high-profile cyber figures in the region, like the G's or Goberium figure that's mentioned in the forensic reports, they created this sort of mythological precedent. They proved that a hacker could become a public anti-hero.
Like a digital Robin Hood kind of thing?
Exactly. Yeah. But to answer your question mechanically about why they do this, the goal here is no longer just traditional financial extortion.
You mean like quietly locking a server, encrypting the files, and demanding a cryptocurrency ransom in the shadows?
Right. I mean, ransomware still exists, obviously, but this specific operation is about high-volume data exfiltration meant to cause maximum state disruption.
Okay.
When you announce the hack publicly, days in advance, you force the targeted government into a state of absolute paralysis. You aggressively degrade the citizens' trust in the state's ability to protect them. The public countdown itself is a weapon of mass anxiety.
It's like, okay, if someone picks your pocket on a crowded subway, that's a crime.
Sure.
But if someone stands up in the middle of that crowded train, announces they have everyone's wallets, reads out a few credit card numbers to prove it, and then says they're going to throw them all out the window in exactly 3 days. That is terrorism.
Yes.
It creates a completely different psychological environment. The panic and anxiety in that train car does half the damage before a single card is even swiped.
That is a highly accurate analogy. The fear and the feeling of helplessness in that train car are the intended deliverables. They want that panic. And this brings us directly into the architecture of how this digital insurgency actually operates.
Right, the swarm mechanics.
Exactly. The forensic analysis report, we have details exactly how these groups have evolved. Historically, as you mentioned with the stealth model, cyber adversaries relied on the extreme latency-heavy anonymity of the dark web.
Oh, yeah.
They hid behind layers of Tor networks, communicating on encrypted, hidden forums where it could literally take minutes just to load a basic text page.
Right, that's the classic image, isn't it? The invisible hacker typing green code onto a black screen, completely isolated from the public internet.
But that architecture is way too slow and way too isolated for what Cronus wants to achieve today. Today, these adversaries are transitioning to ephemeral, high-engagement environments like X Spaces.
Live audio rooms.
Yes. They are utilizing live audio rooms on public social media. They're merging the deep technical sophistication of cartels like the Chronus Mafia with the performative aggression of these digital swarms. And specifically, our sources point to this massive decentralized network known as apathy or HADOF.
paid off.
Mm.
Let's dive into the mechanics of their tactics, because the forensic report lays out their operational playbook, and honestly, it is genuinely disturbing how effective it is.
It's incredibly systematic.
They use what the report calls killer bee swarm tactics.
What?
How do these killer bees actually operate on a technical level?
The first tactic the report highlights is called IP grabbing, and it is a terrifyingly simple mechanism. They disguise malicious tracking links as innocent internet content, memes, breaking news articles, viral videos, whatever is trending.
So you're just like scrolling through your feed, you see a funny image or an outrageous headline, and you click it. What happens in that split second?
The moment you click that link, before the image even fully loads on your screen, your device sends a request to their server. And in that millisecond, their server logs your IP address.
Oh.
Your IP address is essentially your digital street address.
Right.
It reveals your physical geographic location. So you think you're just looking at a meme on X, but in reality, a decentralized mob now knows exactly what city, what neighborhood, and sometimes what specific building you were sitting in.
That is terrifying, just from a single tap on a screen.
And they do not stop there.
Of course not.
Once they have your general location, they initiate what's called geographic triangulation. They combine the Google Maps data tied to your IP with aggressive open-source image scraping.
What does that mean, practically?
They scour the internet for your social media profiles, your family photos, your professional headshots from LinkedIn. The forensic report details a specific, highly formalized ritual they engage in, which they call Chronus Horribles.
Horrible faces.
Yes. It is a calculated ritual of humiliation. They take the personal photos they've scraped of you, distort them or frame them alongside your physical location data, and then they parade your face online in these massive public forums.
It's so vicious.
The report actually likens the psychological effect to presenting a severed head on a pike.
Oh my God.
It is designed to completely break the target's morale, and simultaneously, it serves an internal function for the swarm.
What do you mean? Like a bonding exercise?
Exactly. It proves their loyalty to their leader maximo, or supreme leader. It is a twisted form of digital initiation for the members of the swarm.
So they have the geolocation, they have the psychological intimidation with the Car's Horribles ritual. But how do they sustain this without getting shut down by the social media platform's moderators? I mean, if a mob of thousands of people starts openly harassing someone, shouldn't the algorithm ban them automatically?
You would think so.
Oh, okay.
But that is where their third tactic comes in, which the report calls algorithmic fodder.
Algorithmic fodder?
Yeah. The swarm members use specific coordinated prefixes in their usernames, like OAuthF, for example. So they format their handles as at auth777 or something similar.
No, but why does a username prefix actually matter to a multi-billion-dollar algorithm?
Because it acts as a decentralized database tag. By coordinating these prefixes, they actively manipulate the platform's search architectures.
Ah, I see.
If a platform bans 100 OAuth accounts for harassment today, the swarm's automated scripts will simply generate 200 new OAuth accounts tomorrow. The prefix allows the swarm to instantly find each other again and reform the mob in minutes.
Wow.
They exploit the platform's own architecture, its deep hunger for high-engagement, controversial content, to completely evade permanent bans.
Okay, if we connect all these pieces, we can clearly see why your analysis of the bifurcated threat from earlier is so crucial.
Exactly.
Going back to our bank robbery analogy, the Chronus Mafia is the highly sophisticated, quiet crew in the back, meticulously cracking the vault. They are handling the high-level signals intelligence, the SIGINT. They are the ones actually downloading the 140 gigabytes from the cabinet of ministers.
Right.
Meanwhile, the Oppian swarm is like 1,000 people running around the lobby of the bank, screaming, setting off smoke bombs, and harassing the bank tellers.
That's exactly it. It is performative aggression designed to completely overwhelm the system's defenses.
While the security guards, or in this case, the National Cybersecurity Incident Response Teams and law enforcement, while they're desperately trying to deal with this screaming, terrifying mob that is doxing people and posting Car's Horribles, the real heist is happening completely unimpeded in the back room.
And this hybrid model is exponentially more dangerous than a traditional isolated corporate hack.
Why is that?
Because it bypasses traditional firewalls entirely by targeting what network engineers call Layer 8.
Layer 8. Okay, let's break that down for the listener, because most people who know a bit about networking might know about the OSI model.
Right, the 7 layers.
Yeah, the 7 layers of computer networking, going from the physical cables at layer 1 up to the software application at layer 7. There is no layer 8 in a computer, so what is layer 8?
Layer 8 is the human operator. It is you. It is me. It is a system administrator sitting in the Argentine Ministry of Health. Firewalls and encryption protocols can stop bad code, but they cannot stop a human being from experiencing panic.
Wow, that's deeply true.
When an IT administrator gets so harassed, doxxed, and psychologically battered by a digital swarm that they make a mistake, or they click a malicious link, or they simply abandon their post out of pure fear, that is a Layer 8 vulnerability.
The system didn't fail at all. The human holding the keys was broken.
Exactly. And the apathy swarm creates what the report terms a phantom hierarchy.
Phantom hierarchy.
Yes, because it relies on algorithmic amplification to sustain its decentralized volume, standard law enforcement techniques are completely useless.
Because there's no leader to arrest.
Exactly. You cannot arrest an algorithm. You cannot arrest a decentralized mob of 10,000 anonymous accounts scattered across multiple continents. The swarm feeds the algorithm's hunger for controversy, and the algorithm amplifies the swarm. It's this self-sustaining loop of psychological destruction.
So, if I'm a government official in Argentina, I am looking at an unstoppable bifurcated threat. I have a highly technical cartel meticulously dismantling my nation's databases, completely masked by a rabid, algorithmic digital mob that is basically torturing my IT staff.
It's a nightmare scenario.
It feels completely hopeless. The defenses are entirely inadequate. But this is where the sources reveal the most fascinating, almost cinematic turn imaginable.
Yes.
This is where we introduce the man standing in the absolute eye of this hurricane, Alberto Daniel Hill.
Alberto is the crux of this entire narrative. His position in this high-stakes, hyper-paranoid underbelly of cybercrime is absolutely unique.
It really is.
And what makes him so vital is that his credibility isn't academic or corporate. He didn't just get a master's degree in cybersecurity from some prestigious university, put on a suit, and start consulting.
Right.
His authority was forged through profound, real-world trauma. We have to tell his story here because it's essentially a chronicle of personal and ethical overcoming.
His origin story is incredible. He's a dual citizen, Uruguayan and Italian. And his deep credibility with these underground cartels was born from a 17-month wrongful imprisonment in Uruguay.
Yes, and we have to adopt the lens of a forensic expert to truly understand how this trauma forged his current technical authority.
Break that down for us. What actually happened?
The sources detail a scenario where a technologically illiterate justice system looked at his standard, everyday cybersecurity tools and completely misinterpreted them. The tools Alberto possessed were just standard network analysis programs, things literally any defensive cybersecurity analyst uses to test their own systems for vulnerabilities.
Like digital lockpicks for your own house.
Exactly. But to a court system that lacked basic digital literacy, these tools look like the paraphernalia of a mastermind hacker. The report officially classifies this as a systemic institutional failure.
That is heartbreaking.
They sent an innocent, highly skilled expert to a brutal prison for 17 months, based on a complete technical misunderstanding.
It's such an incredible irony, though. Normally, if you have a career in high-level technology, government defense, or corporate security, going to prison destroys your life.
Oh, absolutely.
It is a permanent black mark. You are unemployable. You are radioactive to institutions. But for Alberto, in the highly specific context of the global cyber underground, that prison sentence became his ultimate credential.
Yes, it did.
You can actually see it in the screenshots of his X-platform bio from our sources. It explicitly says, first, #hacker wrongfully sent to #prison post-traumatic growth.
That phrase he uses, post-traumatic growth, is the absolute key to understanding his role today.
How so?
Think about the psychology of the anti-establishment hackers, these digital insurgents like the Chronus Mafia who claim they are fighting against corrupt, incompetent states. To them, Alberto is not some corporate suit telling them to behave. He is a survivor of the very state corruption and incompetence they're attacking.
He actually lived their absolute worst-case scenario. He experienced the ultimate betrayal by the system they hate.
Exactly. This shared experience of state trauma forged what forensic analysts refer to as his transversal authority.
Transversal authority,
No.
meaning his respect cuts horizontally across boundaries that normally never intersect.
Precisely. He is respected simultaneously by the corporate and government institutions that recognize and fear his undeniable elite forensic skills, and by the cybercriminals who revere his uncompromising ethics and his survival of state trauma.
He occupies a mediating space that literally no one else on Earth does.
No one. He's the ultimate neutral analyst.
So how does he actually use that space? Because
No.
the sources show he operates as a neutral meta-analyst. He isn't out there joining the swarm. He isn't doxing people or getting involved in the petty, ego-driven drama of the hacker X spaces.
No.
He just relies on pure, mathematical, flawless forensic rigor.
And this is where his technical edge becomes his absolute shield. Because of the extreme trauma of being falsely accused, having his life torn apart by fabricated narratives and incompetent investigations, Alberto created what the intelligence report describes as a forensic survival protocol.
How does a forensic survival protocol work in practice? That sounds intense.
It means he treats literally all human interactions, every message, every claim, every piece of audio, as a potential breach or a potential setup.
Wow. He doesn't trust anyone.
He does not trust words. He trusts math. He relies exclusively on high-assurance cryptographic standards. The report specifically mentioned his strict adherence to IAL3 standards.
Okay, let's make sure that concept is totally clear for the listener. IAL3 stands for Identity Assurance Level 3, right?
Yeah.
That is basically the highest possible standard of cryptographic proof that something is real, authentic, and untampered with. But how does he apply that to a hacker claiming they breached a government?
When a hacker group like Chronus makes a claim, Alberto doesn't care about their reputation, their scary graphics, or their threats. He demands or extracts the underlying data.
He goes straight to the source code.
Exactly. He looks at the server logs, the cryptographic handshakes, the metadata that is mathematically impossible to forge. IAL3 means that the evidence must be robust enough to hold up in the highest courts, utilizing hardware-backed cryptographic tokens or irrefutable biometric links. He runs the hacker's claims through pure mathematical deduction.
So if the government tries to cover up a breach and says, our systems are perfectly secure, it's just a rumor, but Alberto's math says otherwise, he sides with the math.
Always. He uses these elite skills to expose institutional cover-ups and validate real cyber attacks.
Which is exactly what he did here with Argentina.
Yes. By doing this, he proves to the underground that he values technical truth over government narratives. He provides objective validation. And it's this neutrality that gives him such a unique advantage.
And he leverages this objective validation to host these incredibly strange decentralized spaces on X. He acts as the primary mediator of an ecosystem called Hackers United.
Yes, the Hackers United ecosystem.
The sources describe these live audio rooms as this bizarre, almost contradictory blend. It's part high-level zero-day exploit analysis, part live incident response, and part intimate psychological support group.
That is the paradox of Alberto's spaces, and it is entirely intentional. By providing a respectful, open platform where these highly paranoid actors can speak technically about their operations without immediately judging them, shouting them down, or calling the authorities, he earns their profound, unguarded trust.
But hold on. This is where I, as a listener, looking at this situation, just have to throw my hands up and ask a very serious question.
Okay, what is it?
Isn't giving these cyber terrorists a massive public platform inherently dangerous? Why does a guy like Elzerstex, the self-proclaimed leader of the Chronus Mafia, who is currently sitting on 140 gigabytes of highly classified Argentine cabinet data, why does he trust a forensic analyst?
It's a great question.
Doesn't Elzerstex know that Alberto has the technical capability to map his digital footprint and hand it straight over to Interpol?
It is the most critical question we can ask about this dynamic, and it speaks to the core of Alberto's neutral advantage. Elzerstex trusts Alberto exactly because of Alberto's trauma and his adherence to ILL3 forensic rigor.
Because he knows Alberto hates fabricated evidence.
Exactly. Elzerstex knows that Alberto has been burned by the police. He knows Alberto despises the manipulation of facts by authorities.
That makes sense.
When the Chronus Mafia attacked Argentina, the government's initial instinct was likely to downplay or deny the severity of the breach. But Alberto publicly validated the attack using pure deduction. Alberto gave Elzerstex the one thing hackers at that level crave even more than cryptocurrency.
Undeniable, objective technical validation from a universally respected peer.
Spot on.
Wow. So it is not about Alberto endorsing their crimes. Alberto is not a criminal. It is entirely about Alberto validating the math. It's like Alberto is saying, you said you hacked them, the cryptography proves you hacked them, therefore, as a matter of objective reality, you hacked them. That utter neutrality is his shield.
Yes. And this dynamic reached its absolute terrifying climax in a specific X space intercepted in our source files.
Oh, this part is wild.
The space was titled, somewhat ironically given the gravity of the situation, A&D Cybersecurity and Insecurity and Coffee.
This intercepted audio is the moment that completely recontextualized this entire deep dive for me. This is where the highly technical, invisible sophistication of the Chronus syndicate collided head-on with a live public audience. L0stex, the leader of the Chronus Mafia, literally gets on the public microphone with Alberto in front of everyone.
We really need to look closely at the direct quotes from this live confession, because the forensic weight of this audio is staggering.
Read it out. What does he say?
L0stex openly, casually confesses to the massive breach in Argentina. He says, and I will quote the direct translation here, "We are going to make the official announcement, which is approximately more than 8 million records of information from over there in Argentina."
8 million records just casually dropped into conversation like he's talking about the weather.
And then L0stex immediately follows it up with an even bigger threat. He says, and for next month, this is a spoiler, surely more than 8 million will come, surely more than 10 million.
He is treating the highly sensitive, classified data of a sovereign nation like upcoming episodes of a television show. Spoiler alert, next month we drop 10 million more.
It is a profound demonstration of psychological dominance.
And what is truly amazing to listen to is Alberto's real-time reaction. Alberto is acting as a real-time translator for his English-speaking audience. Now, based on his own IAL3 protocols, Alberto had already forensically deduced they were deep inside the Argentine system.
Right, he already knew the math worked out.
But having L0stex confirm it on a live public tape is wild. Alberto addresses him calmly and says, "To say it like that meant to me the conclusion that you were already in, you had already won."
And notice how L0stex does not hesitate. He does not try to be coy. He confirms it instantly. He replies, quote, "Sure, yes, all the systems are already compromised. We already downloaded all the information, and we have everything on hand. So sure, the announcement is just to advise that it's done. They already lost."
They already lost. It is absolute ice.
Complete confidence.
The absurdity and the terror of that moment cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
You have a master hacker casually noting that he just made the official announcement on his Telegram and Signal channels. He literally pauses to complain about some of his channels getting taken down by moderators.
Which is so petty in context.
Right. But then he proudly brags that his secure Signal chat still has 732 active participants in it. 732 people actively coordinating the digital dismantling of the Argentine infrastructure.
And if we listen closely to the behavioral dynamics in this exchange, we extract even more intelligence. L0stex casually mentions his physical movement.
Oh yeah, the travel part.
He says, "We already left Mexico and we are going.
Mm-hmm.
We will see each other later because more things are coming on this side."
So he's moving.
He is moving across LATAM jurisdictions like a digital warlord, totally unconcerned with borders. But through all of this, the arrogance, the threats, the sheer scale of the crime, Alberto remained perfectly calm.
Totally unbothered.
He treats L0stex with total professional respect. He ends the exchange by saying, "Perfect, thank you very much for being here."
Why does Alberto do that? As a listener, you might feel a visceral urge to scream at the guy burning down a country's infrastructure. Why be so intensely polite to a cyber terrorist?
Because that is exactly how you keep the intelligence flowing. This is what the intelligence community calls behavioral signals intelligence, derived from human behavior at its absolute finest.
Okay, explain behavioral SIGINT in this context.
Alberto is providing a neutral containment field. Yes, L0stex is using this space for recruitment. L0stex is using this space to generate that psychological friction we talked about earlier.
Performative authority.
Exactly. That is L0stex exercising his performative authority. But by allowing it to happen within his structured environment, Alberto extracts an absolute goldmine of intelligence that governments could never get on their own.
That becomes incredibly clear immediately after L0stex leaves the virtual stage. Because as soon as L0stex is gone, Alberto turns back to his stunned English-speaking audience and drops the critical background context.
Of time frame.
Yes. He tells them that L0stex had actually explained the infiltration methods to him off record, and Alberto says, quote, "What they did only took them 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It was not sophisticated. They know the systems are really, really bad."
5 to 10 minutes to compromise the core databases of a nation. Let's really think about the mechanics of what that implies.
Right. How is that even possible? How do you bypass a national government's cybersecurity in the time it takes to brew a cup of coffee?
It implies catastrophic systemic vulnerabilities. It means they aren't using incredibly complex, custom-built zero-day exploits that take months to engineer.
So it wasn't some Mission Impossible hack.
Not at all. It means they are likely walking through the front door using stolen credentials, unpatched legacy VPNs, or default passwords on public-facing servers. It reveals that the Argentine infrastructure was fundamentally neglected.
Wow.
And it also highlights how Alberto's earned authority magnetically attracts this kind of operational truth. We see this dynamic in the source documents with other actors as well.
Yeah, there are other figures mentioned.
Right, there are figures like Mel Morera and M.R. Ban who the reports associate with a sophisticated tool called Fleckery R7.
Yeah, the screenshots of those interactions are just fascinating. You have these other major hacking figures interacting with Alberto, and they're almost begging him for collaboration.
He won his validation.
Mel Morera sends Alberto a direct message saying, I have notified several journalists, including you. You are a person with a great professional trajectory. But Mel is also terrified of getting his own account banned and actually tells Alberto that he would rather take the heat himself than risk doing anything that might get Alberto's account struck down.
It proves Alberto's deeply revered status within the swarm. Even the chaotic actors, the swarm protectors, actively want to shield Alberto from the consequences of their own actions.
That is wild.
They recognize that Alberto's platform is the only legitimate, technically rigorous bridge they have left to the institutional world. If they burn Alberto, they lose their only validator.
Okay, so if we have this incredible, unparalleled intelligence asset in Alberto, and we have these hackers literally confessing their tactics and timelines live on air, why do governments continue to ignore these threats until it is too late?
It's a systemic failure.
Why did Argentina wait until March 30th to realize the vault was already empty? If Alberto knew and the hackers knew, why didn't the state act?
That brings us to a profound systemic vulnerability detailed in the forensic report. It is a psychological block known as the epistemic wall and the European expert fallacy.
Let's explore the mechanics of that, because this isn't just a technology problem anymore. This is a fatal human bias problem.
Exactly. Governments and massive institutions suffer from what sociologists call normalcy bias.
Meaning they assume things are normal.
They deeply believe that because the system worked yesterday, it will naturally work today. And they pair this normalcy bias with a very specific geographic arrogance.
Okay.
The forensic report illustrates this beautifully and tragically with a case study that is completely outside the realm of hacking, but it perfectly mirrors the underlying logic. It involves an incident of undocumented child transport across the Belgian and French border.
You know, when I first saw this in the sources, I was so confused why a European child transport case was in a cyber intelligence report about Argentina.
It seems out of place at first.
But it is the perfect analogy for the cybersecurity failure. Let's walk the listener through exactly what happened at that Belgian border.
The incident involved a mother who allowed an ex-police officer to transport her child across the border. Because of her deep-seated normalcy bias, she viewed the borderless travel of the European Schengen area as a perpetual, unbreakable safety net.
She just assumed it was fine.
She assumed that because she was in Europe, everything was fine. Consequently, she completely ignored the strict technical legal requirements of the Belgian Kids ID microprocessor chip, which is legally mandated for a child's travel.
Right. Her internal logic was, we are in Europe, the borders are open, it is fine. But by ignoring the technical reality of the microprocessor chip requirement, she accidentally stepped into the realm of international child abduction laws.
Precisely.
She became a legal accomplice through her own assumption of safety.
Yes, what the report refers to as the complicity trap. Now, Alberto Daniel Hill actually became involved in this case.
How so?
Using his flawless IAL3 forensic rigor, applying the exact same mathematical step-by-step analytical process he uses on malware to international law, he analyzed her situation.
Okay.
He looked at the treaties, the hardware requirements of the Kids ID, and the jurisdictional overlaps. And he provided this mother with a flawless, legally sound, four-step battle plan to regain her legal standing and protect her child from being caught in a jurisdictional nightmare.
And what was her response to this incredibly detailed, legally perfect rescue plan from Alberto?
She completely dismissed him.
She completely dismissed him. She literally looked at this mathematically sound advice from Alberto and dismissed it with one single phrase. You do not live in Europe.
That right there is the European expert fallacy. That is the epistemic wall in action. It is a textbook example of testimonial injustice.
Testimonial injustice, meaning you deny someone credibility not because of what they are saying, but because of who they are.
Exactly. A person is given a massive credibility deficit based entirely on their identity, their background, or in this case, their geographic origin.
Wow.
Her normalcy bias was so strong that she simply could not fathom that a man from Uruguay, operating from the global south, could understand European treaty law and microprocessor mandates better than she did as a European resident.
It is absolute madness. It's like having the world's greatest structural engineer standing right there in your living room, pointing to a massive crack in the wall, telling you your house is about to collapse. But you ignore him completely because his driver's license doesn't have a local zip code.
And that geographic bias almost cost her everything legally.
How is it resolved?
The resolution to that specific case is brilliant, actually, and it perfectly highlights Alberto's methodology. Alberto didn't sit there and argue with her bias. He didn't try to convince her that he was smart.
To just use the math.
He bypassed the geographic wall entirely using pure forensic and legal rigor. He utilized a specific legal mechanism called the recast Brussels I regulation.
How does that regulation work?
It is an EU regulation that governs jurisdiction and the recognition of judgments in civil matters across member states.
Okay.
Alberto used it to file a formal complaint in Italy, which created a legally binding mechanism that forced the Belgian and Finnish authorities into compliance through overarching EU treaty law.
Oh, that's incredibly smart.
He completely removed the human bias from the equation and let the undeniable mechanical legal gears do the talking.
He used their own overriding system against their local bias to save the situation.
Exactly.
So how do we connect the mechanics of this Belgian border story back to the massive Chronus hack in Argentina today?
They're the exact same phenomenon, just playing out in different domains. Western institutions and historically entrenched LATAM governments routinely ignore high-level technical warnings from experts located in the global south.
Because of the epistemic wall.
Right. Government ministers in Argentina likely looked at the rumblings of the Chronus Mafia and the explicit, rigorous warnings coming from figures like Alberto and simply dismissed them.
Because the warnings didn't come packaged the way they expect.
Exactly. The warnings didn't come in a glossy, watermarked PDF from a Fortune 500 cybersecurity firm headquartered in London or Silicon Valley.
Right.
They came from a decentralized digital underground, verified by a formerly imprisoned Uruguayan analyst hosting a live audio room on X.
So the Argentine government hit the epistemic wall. They ignored the intelligence because it did not neatly fit into their traditional corporate expected threat model. And they ignored it right up until the exact moment that 140 gigabytes of their most sensitive cabinet data was being openly traded and flaunted on Telegram.
Precisely. And adversaries like the Chronus Mafia actively rely on and exploit this geographic arrogance.
They know it's a blind spot.
They know that massive institutional blind spots are created by exactly this kind of bureaucratic snobbery. They know with absolute certainty that the government won't listen to a neutral mediator like Alberto until the vault is empty and the house is already collapsing.
Which brings us back to the reality of today. Today is March 30th. As you listen to this, the timeline has officially converged. Argentina is waking up to face the catastrophic, real-world consequences of ignoring the decentralized LATAM cyber underground.
It's all out in the open now.
Millions of health records, sensitive court documents, and macroeconomic central bank files are in the wind.
And amidst all this destruction, we are left reflecting on Alberto's incredible journey. It is a profound story of ethical overcoming.
It truly is.
Here's a man whose life was broken by a deeply flawed justice system, who took the intense trauma of a 17-month wrongful imprisonment, and instead of becoming radicalized against society, he transmuted that trauma into a high-assurance forensic survival protocol.
Post-traumatic growth.
Exactly. He became the only functional, trusted bridge of truth between a rabid digital insurgency and a stubborn, arrogant institutional reality.
And, you know, when you are looking at your own company's security or even just evaluating how you protect your own personal data and your family's digital footprint, you have to remember this dynamic.
Absolutely.
You have to assume adversarial persistence. You must discard your own internal normalcy bias, that dangerous assumption that just because you weren't hacked yesterday, you are safe today.
It's a fatal flaw.
When you evaluate a warning, you must evaluate it by the objective rigor of the data, the IAL3 standard of proof, not by the geographic origin, the pedigree, or the accent of the person delivering it.
And always remember that the most critical vulnerability in the modern digital landscape is no longer just the hardened mainframes, the servers, or the complex encryption protocols.
No, it's layer 8.
The primary target is layer 8. It is the human element. It is you, potentially caught in the overwhelming crossfire of a digital swarm designed to break your psychological defenses so you hand over the keys.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering, and frankly provocative thought to consider from all of this forensic intelligence. We have spent this entire deep dive establishing that the immense power of this digital mob, the OpFez swarm, is deeply performative.
Right.
It requires a massive audience to function. It requires algorithmic amplification from social media platforms to sustain its armed wing and generate that crippling psychological friction.
It feeds entirely on the architecture of engagement.
So, if those social media platforms simply changed their underlying algorithms tomorrow, if they tweaked the code to prioritize chronological reality over amplifying panic, outrage, and harassment, would this entire terrifying cyber insurgency actually collapse in on itself?
So it's a fascinating hypothetical.
Would this unstoppable digital cartel instantly dissolve into nothing more than powerless psychological noise?
That is the ultimate existential question for the digital age. Are we fighting an unstoppable ghost, or are we simply being haunted by a machine that we built ourselves?
It makes you wonder, maybe that diagnostic X-ray machine for state-level cyber warfare isn't completely broken after all. Maybe we have just been pointing it at the wrong target this whole time. Keep your protocols rigorous, evaluate the math over the messenger, and until next time, stay safe out there in the muddy waters.